Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Global Atheist News Review. This is where we have our opinionated people, our panel of news reviewers giving us their opinions on the news that we just published called Global Atheist News. And today with us we have Tersia de Plessis, our South African representative, David Orenstein from New York. We have Frank Lovell from Kentucky, and the Esther, the Afro Humanist from the Midlands of the UK. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to join in with this review of the news. And I don't know whether it's because it's the silly season or not. You know how back in the days of journalism, they had what they called a silly season when the news really wasn't very serious and they had to grub around and find things like, I don't know, dogs eating bananas or something. And so we've got quite a few items like that in today's news to review. Starting off, the Evangelical Salvation Proclaimers Anointed Church, popularly known as SPAC Nation, which was founded by Toby Adeboyega in the UK here, was wound up in the public interest in the High Court on Friday, just gone, over a £1.9 million fraud. The church has been subject to media scrutiny following allegations by former church members that they had been financially exploited by senior church personnel. Now, what do you think of that? Is that sort of something that's surprising to you?
That is so hard.
I've got a lot to say about this because I've been following this particular church on the social media for a while now, so I'm not surprised.
Right. I'm not surprised either.
What does surprise me is that there's actually a court case, and that it seems that the High Court in the UK, or the courts in the UK, are actually listening to people who are being defrauded by religious leaders. So that surprises me. The fact that the fraud was done doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing is, nobody's going to jail. Nobody. It's just the church has been closed. But the news says there are more investigations going on because the nature of this church is very unique in that most of the members were ex-gang members, were really young people that have been brought from the streets. They've been offered a better quality of life, a better community, a group of friends, and disguised as church. Most of them live in communal living because they're told, oh, we've got to mentor you. You need a mentor. And so you've got to live with your mentor. Most of them are encouraged to go to work. And when they go to work, their money is collected off them. Oh, this church, the means by which they get money off these young children has been very, very problematic. One time, the youngsters were told to go and donate blood for money. One of the pastors said, "Oh, our founder's birthday is coming soon, and we all need to contribute." She said, "You've got to beg, steal, or borrow. Whatever you do, you've got to be." Young kids have been defrauded in this church. And why? Because the leader has to wear his designer clothes. You need to see he's so flamboyant. All he wears is Gucci, Fendi. There's something he says when he steps out, he will say, "Offending with Fendi."
Well, it's worse than that even. It's not just clothes. Listen to this. Last year, his name's Toby Adeboyega. He celebrated his birthday with, are you sitting down to hear this? 6 Lamborghinis, 2 Ferraris, and a Rolls-Royce Cullinan.
Yeah. This sounds like in the United States something called the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
Where frankly it's all about fleecing and taking as much money from people as possible, with the idea of it's better in my hands because I'm the church leader and I know what to do with it than than you do. And the more you give, the more holy you become. It's such a ripoff. It's like the saying, one person talking about being the Redeemer is crazy. Somebody talking about being the Redeemer with followers is a religion. and that's essentially what you have, I think, with every religion, because in essence they're all crazy. They're all really there to fleece people for their money. And this is clearly they got caught.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the behavior is not very Jesus-like, because Jesus was explicit about poverty. And the other thing that struck me is this whole thing about should Christians or followers of Jesus be poor or not. It's not a new thing. I mean, in the 14th, 13th century, you had the Benedictines and the Franciscans and the monks, and there were actually fights amongst the different priest brotherhoods about the vows of poverty. And I did a little search before we came on, and there are tens of Bible verses about poverty. Jesus was explicit that it will be difficult for the rich to enter into the kingdom of heaven. So I'm more and more becoming an advocate for teaching the Bible, because the people who get fleeced are fleeced because they don't know the Bible.
Yes.
And when we talk about the item on the Gallup polls, I would just like to comment on this thing of the Bible again and knowledge of the Bible. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on this one for now.
Do you see any evidence of televangelism or prosperity gospelism in the Bible Belt, Frank?
Are you kidding? No, yeah, we have more than our fair share here in Kentucky.
Right.
That's for sure.
I doubt that they would be dragged to the before any courts in Kentucky, Frank.
They don't have a thing to worry about, unfortunately, here in Kentucky. The courts are not going to mess with them. I mean, I think
and they don't pay any taxes either.
No.
Say again?
Right.
And neither the pastors nor the churches pay any taxes.
Right.
Exactly.
And the thing is, this pastor, why I'm particularly interested in this particular church. So he is an immigrant to the UK.
Yeah.
And he knowing what the African pastors look like, they somehow want to, it's like this prosperity gospel, trying to be better than others, trying to be richer than you. I can pull in more crowd, I can pull in, and so he's trying to paint a picture, making people think that he's got it all together. He's got all so much money. But at what cost? If you are one who's preaching the gospel, and Tersia, you were talking about that scripture that says it'd be very hard for rich people to enter into the kingdom, So now the thing with rich people, if you know rich people, well, if you know some of them, they don't go around flaunting their wealth. The rich person has no need to go around flaunting and saying things like offending with Fendi. When you see someone like, what's his name? Bill Gates and some other folks like himself, they come out looking very ordinary. They just would wear just a shirt, t-shirt. They're not out there flaunting wealth. Yes, they've got it all, but what's the need? What's the point? When people start flaunting, when people start,
and they've given billions of dollars to charity. That's
Yes.
the other thing.
Exactly.
The Bill and
When-
Melinda Gates Foundation has
Yeah.
given billions for sustainability, for education, for
Vaccines.
vaccines.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
yeah.
When people
is-
come on social media and
Yeah.
flaunt wealth, you've got to question these
Absolutely.
things, because not
Mhm.
everything you see is you mustn't believe everything you see online.
Yes.
Some of it is all just make believe.
But there's an
Mhm.
element, isn't there, in quite a lot of churches? I mean, Roman Catholic cathedrals are very bling. They've got gold everywhere. They've got
Mhm.
lame gowns and pretty much everything of wealth. Huge paintings done by marvelous artists. And it seems to me that there's amongst the sheep, their congregation, they're aptly named, the tendency is to consider that wealth equals truth.
Mhm.
Success
Seems
equals
to be.
truth. Must be right. Let's look at his wealth. Yeah.
Right.
You'll be pleased to hear, Esther, that a Nigerian Facebook site has described the SPAC Nation Church as rogues disgracing Nigeria all over the world.
Mm.
Yes,
So-
I can completely agree. And you see, the problem I have with religion is this idea that so Toby sometimes goes online and does these little charity events. During the pandemic, he went to a couple of places, bought a few things, and made this big show of himself donating this stuff to these places. And you get people saying, but at least he's doing something good with the money, but at
Yeah.
least he's giving. So this idea that because he's done something good, so we mustn't question the rest, we mustn't bother with how he gets the money or what else he's doing with the money, and like with most of these preachers, because someone got healed yesterday, we shouldn't question their motives. We shouldn't be asking if there really is a God behind all of these things, what they're doing, as long as they're doing something good. It's like people are content in just the feel good factor. No,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, when you're raking in that much money, it's probably quite easy to hive off a little bit of it as window dressing to make it look as though you're charitable. Moving on. UK. The government's offshoring policy of deporting people to Rwanda. According to the Archbishops of Canterbury and York and 23 other bishops, that policy should shame us as a nation, they say. They claim in a letter that they published in the Times that whether or not the first deportation flight leaves Britain, this policy should shame us as a nation. The shame is our own, because our Christian heritage should inspire us to treat asylum seekers with compassion, fairness, and justice, as we have for centuries. That's all very well and good, you might think. But then they go on to say the people being deported are the vulnerable that the Old Testament calls us to value. What do you think of that?
Hypocrisy. I cry hypocrisy. That's all I'll say as a South African.
I'm unaware of much calling to value vulnerable in the Old Testament. I mean, my knowledge of the Old Testament is sketchy, but doesn't it start with the drowning of the entire population of the planet?
Yes.
Right after God judged his creation to be good.
Yeah.
Then he wipes out everybody but 8 people.
Yeah.
Go figure.
What this whole issue to me is also it shows how churches and religions evolve to and window dress and see themselves in a light that they are not, because the Anglican Church, you don't have to go too far back to. I don't recall from my knowledge of history that might not be it might be lacking in some respects, but I know the Anglican Church was against apartheid in South Africa, but I don't recall that the Anglican Church as such has ever in the past, especially in the past, have been really proactive to fight for the rights of the vulnerable.
No. Mostly they prey on the vulnerable.
Mhm.
Exactly. So the hypocrisy is just so flabbergasting, you know.
Yes.
But and the
Anyway.
interesting thing is that the Anglican Church. I did read, but I can't remember that the Rwandan Anglican Church who
Yes.
completely disagrees with the. They want the refugees to come.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the UK Anglicans and the Rwandan Anglicans are
Yes.
in complete disagreement. So I wonder to whom of the two parties God is speaking.
Right, exactly.
It's a rift in, what do they call it? The Grand Communion of Anglicanism. That's not the right words, but they've got some sort of all-enveloping description like that. And you're right, they're absolutely right, because Archbishop Laurent Mbanda, who is Rwanda's Anglican Archbishop, he thoroughly disagrees with the Church of England leaders about the UK's asylum plan. He says many Rwandans have lived in exile because of the genocide in the 1990s, so they understood the issues faced by people fleeing their homes, and they will be accommodated and supported while their claim is processed and granted permanent refugee status to remain in Rwanda. So it's a rift.
Well,
I think some of these things are easier said than done. They think these things, but don't think it until it starts to create some serious problems. I was watching a documentary not too long ago. This cult, they were trying to get people to join in a cult, so they went out on the street to go and fetch. They went to go and bring people on the drug addicts, homeless people. Right, went and brought them in bus truckloads. Brought them into the what you call it now, their compound. Now, these people were offered a better life. They were offered, what they don't get on the street, because the plan was the compound would become self-sufficient. And so these people were offered all sorts of things. Now, you bring a whole load of these people over here, and now you haven't got enough resources to take care of these people that you have brought over. So all your promises have all gone to nothing. And they do say that a promise unfulfilled is nothing but a lie. And so the next thing you know, the people, the homeless, the drug addicts, now they've got nothing to do. Now they start to grumble, they start to cause and create trouble in that community where they've been uprooted into. And so it becomes really, really messy. And one day, I think one of them brought out a knife, was going to stab one of the people in the, and that's when they said, enough, we've got to get them out. So these things look good on paper. They look good. Oh, this until it's time to enact and time to do what you have promised. Then, when the problems start to arise, the little hiccups, then it's harder to fulfill. You take people who have never lived in this place, you just ship them over there and think somehow they will integrate, they will adjust, and there's going to be issues, some serious issues.
It's a complex culture, isn't it?
if I'm not mistaken, I have been following this story on because it was quite prominent on our local news in South Africa as well. Is there not some money involved because
Yes.
the
There must be.
Rwandan government is getting money
Yes.
to accept these people? So
Yes.
once again, there's this whole thing of on the poverty and protecting the vulnerable. It links to the previous story about fleecing people. So what the UK government is doing here is that they're throwing money at a problem that is
Yes.
much larger and
Yes.
much more complicated than just shipping people off somewhere. You know,
Mm.
this is a very complicated situation that cannot just be handled by throwing money at it.
No. But I love it when the archbishops take lumps out of each other.
Yes.
Moving on, we've got a lovely story for you Americans. Listen to this. They kicked God out of the schools and welcomed the drag queens. They took down our flag and replaced it with a rainbow. They seek to disarm Americans and militarize our enemies. Let's bring back the basics: God, guns, and glory.
I love drag queens. I do. I absolutely love them. So forgive me if I'm partial to drag queens. So no disparaging drag queens around here. No.
There you go.
we've got one in this country who calls herself Cara Van Park. Caravan Park.
Caravan.
Caravan. I see.
That's so smart. That is well.
Okay. Can I just say something here?
Go ahead.
So, drag queens wear costumes, right? They wear things to beautify themselves, elaborate, and now young people who do in schools, you do acting, and as part of your acting, you've got to put on costumes. The people that we watch on EastEnders, Coronation Street, they all act a role. They all act as something they're not. And as part of that role, they put on costumes. So, yes, these are what we call drag queens. But really and truly, there's so many people who are in some form of drag or the other. Because we're putting on costumes that we wouldn't necessarily wear on a daily basis, you know.
I want to get this in. Put on costumes like bishops.
Yeah.
I feel that I really have to jump in here as a student of English literature. But I find this comment is such a preposterous, fantastic display of absolute ignorance. Because if you watch the movie Shakespeare in Love with Ray Fiennes and Gwyneth Paltrow, and if you know your English literature and just a little bit of history, then you will know that up to as late as the 17th century, women were not allowed to appear on stage. Yet stage productions were incredibly popular. And in every single Shakespeare play, the roles of the women were played by young boys and men. And that is so it's not even about dressing up in costumes, because I think the problem that these people have with drag queens is that it's men dressing up in elaborate female costumes. But it's just inverse, because in Shakespeare's day, women were not allowed to appear on stage. So every single Romeo and Juliet for a couple hundred years would have been played. The Juliet would have been a woman, and a man in a woman's costume.
That's right.
So this is just such a preposterous display of ignorance of so many things.
Right.
Well, you might like to know.
In the United States, I think you're finding that the least pluralistic, the least democratic, the most ignorant are winning. I hate to say it this way, and I am usually very much an optimist, but you find that that just on Friday, the Supreme Court made essentially a religious decision to remove a woman's reproductive freedom. In the United States, slavery didn't end till 1865. Women didn't get the right to vote until 1920. This progressivism that you've seen through the decades is taking a radical step backwards. I think that because, and I think I mentioned it on the show, that if Roe goes, so does who you can love, so does interracial marriage. And lo and behold, right after the Roe decision, 21 states put into effect, you can't have an abortion in the state.
Well, I'm going to stop you there, David, because that news came out after Global Atheist News had gone to press, as it were. And so it will appear that we will be reacting to the repeal of the abortion Roe versus Wade law next week.
Okay. That's good. I've got some things to say about that, but
then I'll shut up.
Yeah.
Except to say, I will be an expatriate in about 9 years.
Really?
And I've told my adult daughters to leave as well.
Oh, where are you going?
Huh?
Where are you going?
Romania.
Oh, right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Where to? I didn't hear.
No, Romania.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, you are absolutely right about the sort of people who are taking the backward plunge here, because the words that I read out at the beginning of this piece are by Carrie Lake, who is a pro-Trump candidate for governor of Arizona. And she condemns drag queens, except that a drag queen, a guy called Richard Stevens, who performs as drag queen Barbara Seville, which I also love.
Barbara of Seville.
Barbara Seville. He used to be friends with her, and he's performed in front of her kids and when they were young. And he performed as Marilyn Monroe in front of her daughter, who was about 10. And so he now thinks that she's a complete hypocrite. And it's alarming to him that people with these sorts of views are now rising into positions of power. Scary. I'll just give her the last word. She said that a drag queen performing in front of kids in Texas is grooming, child abuse, and maybe that's acceptable in Dallas, but it will not be tolerated in a Carrie Lake-led Arizona. There you go.
Hey. Get your house in Romania ready, David. That's all I can comment on that.
I figure it's part of the EU.
Yeah. Unlike Britain, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, staying with the US, another pro-Trump Republican candidate who is a pastor, name of Mark Burns, and he's running for the Congress in South Carolina. You won't believe this, because, last week we had a pastor who was calling for death to lesbians. A bullet in the back of the head was too good, remember? And the week before that, we had a pastor who was calling for death to gays, execution of gays. This one, he's calling for the killing of the parents of LGBT kids.
Can I ask David something quickly about this? I do find that the word, the phrase "killing people for this" or "killing people for that" is very easily stated in the United States. I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, about the tendency of people from the southern states to be more violent in their reaction, and to be more violent when they feel that they or a family member or somebody part of the in-group have been slighted. And that was attributed to the fact that the ancestors of the people who moved to the south of America, who settled there, were mostly from Scottish and Irish ancestors, and they were herded. And that herder community have what they call an honor culture. And I found that quite interesting. All these comments about killing the other, killing this and killing that, it's a what's your comment about this whole thing of in group, out group, and the strong sense of an honor culture, and that there's this honor thing, and then there is a greater tendency towards violent reactions in these honor cultures.
Well, go ahead, Jim. Frank, go ahead, please.
I think it's all very, very biblical. All this killing. I've got a list here. These are all references in the Bible to verses that make it clear that God commands at times killing all witches, fortune tellers, false prophets, anyone who sins, sons of sinners, non-Hebrews, gays, non-believers, adulterers, any child who hits their parent. And I mean, I've got a list here. It's all very biblical.
And the original writers of the Old Testament in particular it was a herding culture. So it corroborates this whole idea of so what the hypothesis is that herder cultures depend on a very tight-knit group, because they have to move around to look for ancestors, to look for grazing. And in cultures where they were doing a lot of agriculture, as sort of planting crops, those cultures had larger groups of people, because in places where the land could sustain larger groups of people with crop growing as the main source of food, there were more people that had to live together and had to learn how to live together. But herder communities were smaller communities, and they were very dependent, especially where the soil was poor, and they were dependent on grazing, and violence was more prevalent because you weren't stuck to the soil for your dependency on food, and you could, if things got hot, you take your cows and your goats and you move away, and your camels and you move away. So and raiding was commonplace, because you could raid the others, steal their cattle and run off. But you can't do that in agricultural societies, because you're stuck to the soil.
Tersia, we've got David scheduled for a free thought hour. When we can
make a note, please discuss that for us.
Yeah,
we can quiz him on all that stuff. He is our expert. He's an anthropologist at one of the New York universities, so that would be great.
City University of New York. Yeah. Happy to talk about it. I mean, generally, you have to remember that, for the most part, the quote unquote Bible Belt Southern states, they were not too happy with the Emancipation Proclamation. They wanted to see slavery continue for economic benefit. I mean, fast forward to 2022, and what you find is you're tracking from a sociological point of view, lack of education, lack of income, high belief in religion, and all those things track together. And what goes with that is sort of not necessarily patriotism, but nativism.
That's it. Yeah.
That those ideas and those aspects of tribalism. And when you put into that, I can't know the world other than my own community. It makes everybody else the enemy.
Otherness.
Yeah.
Esther,
Yes.
in the UK, we have laws against hate speech, don't we?
Yes, we do.
If somebody were to do a video like these pastors do, calling for the killing of gays, lesbian, and the parents of gay kids, wouldn't they get arrested?
Yes, they would. that would be considered hate speech. Yes.
Yes. So come on, you Americans, what's wrong?
I mean, even to the extent there was a church that put out flyers just outside the church. You know, the posters. Give your life to Christ, you will go to hell, you will burn. And it took some members in the community to say, look, that's hate speech.
Yep.
You're condemning people in the community to a place of, and they just brought it up at the next council meeting, and this church was asked to take down these things because that is that's not permissible in a society where you have people that do not believe necessarily with this your religion. So.
And I am proud to say that even in to quote a former president of the United States, a shithole country like South Africa, that would be hate speech as well.
And did he call South Africa shithole or Nigeria? It was Nigeria.
It was all African countries, I believe.
Oh, did he now? Right.
It was a blanket statement. It was a blanket statement.
Right.
Probably couldn't point to them on the map anyway.
No.
I'll agree with that.
It gets even more crazy because at a large camp meeting, the preacher there had a long rant against beards. They are not godly. Did you know they're not apostolic?
God.
Anyway, I want to end on a more upbeat note, because there is some good news, and it is that there's been another Gallup poll, and Americans are leaving the belief in God proposition. Way back between 1944, way back in, let me have a look at this. 98% people said they believed in God in 1944. It's now down to 81. That's a move in the right direction, isn't it?
Yeah, when you think about it now, 81%, that still sounds like an awful lot of people, but it does mean that 1 out of every 5 persons are in effect atheists. I think that's terrific news. I really do.
Yep.
But I don't want to be the down and but when I read in preparation for tonight's review, I made a note here. I said, on the Gallup poll, non-belief versus apathy. And that is something that does make me a little bit nervous, because it's no use. We have 81, we have, say, what's 20 odd percent of people being non-believers.
17.
50. I can't do maths. So it's no, and it's no use that number increasing on a yearly basis. But the people who still beat the drums and who have the power and who make the laws are the ones who still believe in things like a literal creation and a young earth.
Right.
Yeah.
And so while it's very good news that the number of non-believing people is growing, we should never allow ourselves to be complacent, and we have to continue to guard against apathy, because like I say, it's no use having even having 60% people religious and 40% non-religious. If those non-religious people are not going to begin speaking up and saying and speaking out and being activists in whatever way they can, then it's not going to be any use what the numbers.
Yeah, so the actual numbers are 81% believe in God, 17% do not believe in God, and a couple of percent haven't decided.
Well, but if you haven't decided, you're a de facto non-believer. You're not a believer if you're undecided. So
well, they're unsure.
I claim all 81, all 19%.
Yeah, you know, the demographics is what interests me, in that if it's young, it's younger and younger people actually
Yeah.
who are giving up not only religious belief, but the rituals of going to church and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good because people are aging out at a younger age.
Yes.
Going to religious service, finding the need. They might have they might believe in God personally, or they may be skeptical, but they're not putting their beliefs on anyone in the process. They're seeing it as a private situation, and to me that that's fine. If I would take someone who believed in God but kept it to themselves before I would take an evangelical. And certainly that person is much more aligned with secularism, humanism, atheism, in wanting to see a more pluralistic society. So we have to keep working, keep making secular babies.
Very good point.
David is quite right. The largest decline is shown by liberals, young adults, and Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Keeps spreading the word of humanism, atheism, and this there's a different way to live life. You don't need a God. I've got a badge that says I'm good without God.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
And even if people aren't turned on by atheism or non-belief, the organized religions in the United States and around the world really have shown themselves to be utter failures. Between the sex scandals, the financial scandals, the lack of acceptance and diversity, it's a multi-pronged situation that people are turning away from God. It's not so much, we're doing such a great job, which many of us are, being advocates for non-belief, but it's the organizations themselves, and the organizations themselves will tell you that they're not reaching people anymore because of all the bad actors. All of the bad actors.
Yeah. It turns people off when all of their priests and pastors are found guilty of pedophile behavior and other sorts of abuse. But interestingly, about half of those who do believe in God say they think that God hears their prayers and can intervene on their behalf. But 28% say God hears prayers but can't intervene, and 11% think God does neither.
Then they're basically deists, I suppose.
Yeah.
A God that does neither is significant. How? I wonder.
Right.
He's no God.
Right.
Yeah, that's the sort of God I like. No God.
Yeah.
Guys, you've been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for coming and giving us your views on the news.
Wonderful.
Take care, and
Bye-bye.
we'll see you again.
bye.
Oh my gosh.
Bye-bye.